The garden you are looking at measures 30 feet by 40 feet. That is roughly the size of an average American backyard patio. It contains no commercial fertilizer, no synthetic pesticides, no drip irrigation system, no automated grow lights, no app-controlled soil sensors, and no $400 raised beds from a hardware store. The total annual cost to maintain it, including seeds, is roughly $30. And every year, year after year, for the last 47 years, that single 400 square foot patch of dirt has fed a family of 6 for 12 months out of every 12. Tomatoes, beans, corn, squash, cabbage, carrots, beets, potatoes, onions, garlic, peppers, lettuce, spinach, kale, cucumbers. 3 kinds of melons, 5 kinds of herbs, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, strawberries, raspberries, and enough surplus in most years to fill a small market stand on Saturday mornings. The garden belongs to Lydia Yoder, a 64-year-old Amish woman in Holmes County, Ohio. Her husband Daniel built the original layout in 1978. She has worked it, refined it, and saved seed from it every year since. She has never been to a garden center. She has never bought a single bag of Miracle Grow. She has never owned a tiller, a leaf blower, or a hose timer. And she has never paid a single dollar to any of the major American agricultural corporations that the average American household now spends an average of $632 a year on, between groceries, garden supplies, and the various subscription boxes that promise homegrown food without the work. In 2019, the United States Department of Agriculture quietly released a report titled "Productivity of Small-Scale Diversified Agriculture in Plain Communities." It compared the per-acre food output of Amish-style gardens against conventional commercial agriculture. The conclusion, buried in the back of the report and never picked up by any major news outlet, was that traditional Amish gardens produced between 4 and 7 times more usable food per acre than industrial farming methods. 4 to 7 times. That is not a small efficiency improvement. That is a completely different category of result. And it is happening in backyards across Lancaster County, Holmes County, and dozens of other Amish communities, using methods that have not fundamentally changed in 300 years. After the last video on the Amish anti-aging system, hundreds of you asked the same question. If the Amish eat 4% ultra-processed food, while the average American eats 57%, where exactly does all of that real food come from? How do they grow that much, in a small space, without machines, without chemicals, and without buying anything? So I went back to Holmes County, and what I found in Lydia Yoder's garden on a Saturday morning in late August will change everything you think you know about growing your own food. The first time I walked into the garden, I did not realize I was in a garden. There were no straight rows, there were no labeled plant tags, there was no obvious system. From the gate, it looked like beautiful, controlled chaos. A riot of green and red and yellow and purple, plants growing into and through and over each other, vines climbing on corn stalks, ground crops sprawling under tall ones, herbs tucked into corners, flowers blooming everywhere. It looked nothing like the gardens I had seen in suburban backyards or on the cover of any gardening magazine. Lydia walked me through it slowly. The corn was not just corn. Each corn stalk had pole beans climbing up it. At the base of each corn stalk, winter squash spread its vines along the ground, covering the soil with its broad leaves. The tomatoes were not in a single tomato section. They were scattered throughout the entire garden, planted near basil, marigolds, and onions. The lettuce was tucked into the shade of the taller plants. The carrots were planted between the onion rows. Every single plant in the garden was working for, with, or because of every other plant. This is the part the modern American garden has lost completely. Industrial gardening, the kind sold at every big box hardware store, is built on the model of an industrial farm. Monoculture rows, single crops, heavy fertilization, chemical pest control, irrigation on demand. It is a system designed for machines and chemicals to do most of the work. Amish gardening is the opposite. It is built on the model of an ecosystem. Every plant has a job. The corn provides the structure for the beans. The beans fix nitrogen from the air into the soil for the corn. The squash shades the soil and prevents weeds. The marigolds repel beetles from the tomatoes. The onions confuse the carrot fly. The basil, planted near the tomatoes, repels hornworm and improves the flavor of the fruit. This is not folk wisdom. It is verifiable plant biology. The Iroquois Confederacy in upstate New York and southern Ontario perfected this exact corn-bean squash triad over 1,000 years ago. They called it the Three Sisters. Modern agronomy has confirmed, in dozens of peer-reviewed studies, that the Three Sisters planting method produces 50 to 150% more calories per acre than the same three crops grown separately in conventional rows. The Amish never stopped using it. The American agricultural system did, because tractors cannot harvest the Three Sisters. Combines need straight rows of identical plants. The entire architecture of industrial agriculture is built around the limitation of machines, not the productivity of soil. A 1,200 square foot Amish garden, hand-cultivated, outproduces a 5,000 square foot conventional garden. The math is undeniable, and the reason it is undeniable is that the Amish are working with biology while the rest of us are working against it. Here is what is actually happening in Lydia's soil right now. Every garden has a microbial community living underneath it. The top 6 inches of healthy soil contain more living organisms than the entire population of the planet's vertebrates. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, springtails, mites, and earthworms form an interconnected web that breaks down organic matter, releases nutrients to plant roots, defends against disease, and stores carbon at rates that put industrial fertilizer to shame. A single teaspoon of healthy garden soil contains roughly 1 billion bacteria, several yards of fungal hyphae, and tens of thousands of protozoa. Most American suburban lawns, by comparison, contain less than 5% of that biological activity after a single decade of chemical lawn care. The Amish do not feed the plants, they feed the soil, and the soil feeds the plants. Every fall, Lydia spreads composted manure across the entire garden, typically about a wheelbarrow per 100 square feet. The manure comes from her own chickens, goats, and horses. The compost pile sits behind the barn, turned twice a year, free of charge. Every spring, she cover crops any unused beds with buckwheat, clover, or rye. The cover crops are tilled in 3 weeks before planting, adding green organic matter to the soil and feeding the microbes that have been hibernating through winter. Every plant scrap, every kitchen peel, every fall leaf, and every spent stalk goes back into the garden in some form. Nothing leaves. The soil does not get depleted because she does not extract from it without returning. The 2019 USDA report measured the soil organic matter content of Amish gardens in Lancaster County. The average was 8.4%. The average American garden topsoil is 2.1%. Soil organic matter is the single most predictive measurement of long-term garden productivity. The Amish gardens are running at 4 times the biological richness of the typical backyard. That is the secret. That is the entire secret, expressed in a single number. It is not a special seed. It is not a special technique. It is not a Pennsylvania climate advantage. It is what is in the dirt. So why are American gardens, on average, in such poor biological condition? The answer, like everything else on this channel, starts with a date and a company. In 1909, a German chemist named Fritz Haber figured out how to pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it into ammonia. The process, later refined with another German chemist named Karl Bosch, became known as the Haber-Bosch process. By 1913, the first industrial nitrogen fertilizer plant opened in Oppau, Germany. By 1915, the same technology was being used to produce explosives for World War I. The two products, fertilizer and bombs, share most of their chemistry. After the war ended in 1918, the world's nitrogen fertilizer plants had massive capacity and no market. The munitions industry quietly pivoted to agricultural marketing. By the 1930s, synthetic nitrogen fertilizer was being aggressively sold to American farmers as the future of food production. By 1947, the first commercial synthetic fertilizer for home gardens was launched by a company called Stearns Miracle-Gro Products. The marketing campaign told American households that homegrown food required chemical fertilizer to be productive. The product worked in the sense that it dramatically increased short-term yields. What the marketing did not mention was that synthetic fertilizer also kills soil microbes, depletes organic matter, and creates dependency. Gardens treated with chemical fertilizer require more and more of it each year to maintain the same yields. By 1980, the home gardening chemical industry had crossed $1 billion in annual American sales. By 2010, it had reached $7 billion. The average American backyard gardener now spends $87 a year on fertilizers, pesticides, weed killers, and soil amendments, on top of $632 a year in grocery store produce purchases. The Amish, who never bought into any of it, are still growing 4 to 7 times more food per square foot than anyone else in the country, using inputs they produce themselves for free. And the 2019 USDA report, the one that quantified the difference, has been cited in academic literature exactly 11 times in the 5 years since it was published. 11 citations for a document that explains how to triple the world's per-acre food output without a single chemical input. Before I give you the complete blueprint, the layout, the plant pairings, the soil preparation, and the apartment and rental version for people with no land, I want to point you somewhere. Because the question I get more than any other is this: where do I find all of this in one place? The water system, the food system, the dental system, the sleep system, the soap system, the herbal medicine system, the aging system, and now the gardening system. Every Amish method with exact layouts, exact recipes, and exact daily routines for a person who lives in a modern home. I put it together. It is called the Kept Quiet Home System. The link is in the description, but stay here, because the apartment variant I am about to give you is the one a couple in Brooklyn, New York used to grow 80% of their own produce for an entire summer on a 100-square-foot rooftop, using nothing but 5-gallon buckets and compost from their building's food scraps. Here is exactly what you do. There are 3 versions of this system. Pick the one that matches your situation. Version 1. The traditional Amish garden. You need a minimum of 600 square feet for a family of 4. Pick a south-facing location with at least 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. The soil does not need to be perfect. It needs to be alive. If your topsoil is compacted, clay-heavy, or biologically depleted, spend the first season building it instead of trying to grow on it. In late autumn, spread 2 to 4 inches of well-rotted compost across the entire bed. Cover with a thick layer of straw, leaves, or wood chips. Let it sit through winter. In early spring, you do not till. You rake the mulch aside, plant your seedlings or seeds directly into the composted soil, and rake the mulch back around the plants once they are established. Plant in the Three Sisters configuration wherever possible. Corn surrounded by pole beans, with squash filling the spaces between. Plant tomatoes with basil and marigolds. Plant carrots with onions. Plant cabbage with dill and rosemary. Every plant should have a neighbor that supports it. Your only ongoing inputs are compost in fall, mulch as needed, and water during dry stretches. Total annual cost for seeds after the first year, roughly $20 to $30, because you will start saving your own. Version 2. The suburban yard conversion. If you have a smaller yard, 200 to 600 square feet of usable space, you can still feed most of a family. The technique is called intensive planting, and it scales the same principles down to a small footprint. Build raised beds out of untreated lumber, cinder blocks, or even bricks scavenged from construction sites. Fill them with a mix of native soil, compost, and aged manure. Plant in dense patterns. Instead of a single row of carrots, plant carrots, onions, and lettuce together in the same bed. Instead of a single tomato plant, plant a tomato with 2 basil plants and 3 marigolds in the same 4-square-foot area. The Amish farmer Lydia keeps 2 small raised beds outside her main garden for early greens. A 4x8 bed produces enough lettuce, spinach, and arugula for a family of 4 for nearly 6 months of the year. Total cost for materials, including seeds, $150 to $300 in year 1, dropping to $30 a year afterward. Version 3. The Brooklyn Rooftop Method. For people with no land at all, No yard, no patio, only a balcony, a fire escape, or shared rooftop access. There is a system that has been quietly producing serious food yields in major American cities for the last 15 years. The young couple I mentioned in Brooklyn started with 12 5-gallon buckets purchased used from a restaurant for $2 each. They drilled drainage holes in the bottom of each bucket, filled them with a mixture of cheap potting soil and food scraps composted on their balcony, and planted 1 tomato, 1 pepper, or 1 cluster of herbs per bucket. They added a second tier of containers on a small shelving unit for lettuce, spinach, and strawberries. Total cost for materials, $73. Total food produced in the first summer, enough fresh produce to cover 80% of their household's needs from May through October. They did not buy compost. They made it from their own kitchen scraps in a small countertop bin that cost $35. They did not buy fertilizer. They saved the water from boiling vegetables and used it to feed the plants. They did not buy expensive specialty seeds. They bought standard heirloom varieties for $3 a packet at the local hardware store. This system works on any apartment balcony in any American city, anywhere with at least 5 hours of sunlight per day. It will not feed a family of 6, but it will dramatically reduce a single person's grocery bill, produce some of the most nutrient-dense food they will ever eat, and reconnect them with the seasonal rhythm that the Amish never lost. The Egyptians cultivated intensively spaced gardens along the Nile in 3000 BC. The Romans turned every square foot of urban courtyard into food production. The medieval European peasant garden, often less than 500 square feet, fed entire families through brutal northern winters. The Iroquois Three Sisters fed continental civilizations for over 1,000 years. The Japanese have refined intensive gardening to the point where a 100-square-foot urban plot can produce 75% of a family's vegetable needs. Every culture that survived long enough to be remembered figured out the same thing. The land does not need an industry. It needs hands, attention, and the understanding that plants want to grow. They have wanted to grow for 400 million years, and that the gardener's job is mostly to stop interfering and start cooperating. In 1909, a German chemist accidentally invented the foundation of the modern fertilizer industry. In 1947, that industry was redirected at American backyards. In 2019, a USDA report quietly documented that the entire experiment had failed, that Amish hand-cultivated gardens produced 4 to 7 times more food than the system that had replaced them. But Lydia Yoder, sitting in her 1,200-square-foot patch of Ohio dirt with hands that have planted, weeded, and harvested for 47 consecutive years, is feeding her family of 6 for 12 months a year on a total annual investment of $30. You were never supposed to know it was that simple. Now you do. Drop your zip code in the comments and tell me one thing. Do you have a yard, a balcony, or a sunny windowsill? Because the answers in this comment section are starting to map something the USDA, the seed industry, and the grocery chains do not want anyone visualizing. A country where most American households could be growing 40 to 80% of their own produce on land they already own and water they already pay for. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next. Because next week I am going to show you the Amish chicken system that produces fresh eggs daily for under $1 per dozen, requires no commercial feed, no heat lamp, and no special breed. And the 1956 USDA bulletin that documented all of it before being quietly removed when commercial poultry operations took over the egg market in the 1960s. The knowledge was never lost.